This week, I did a very vulnerable thing. I sent a message sharing something that I desire. And in sitting with the space between my message and the response, which I'm still sitting in, so much came up, and it was so fascinating and profound that I feel really grateful that I had the opportunity to sit in that. And I want to share it with you because I think that it's going to blow your mind as well about your own attitudes and behaviors.
Welcome to Deep Within. On this show, we dive deep into the nervous system, emotional healing, and transformation from within the body. When I started my personal development journey, it was all in the mind, doing affirmations, visualizations, listening to endless motivational videos. And I found that this approach, without actually getting my body on board, only left me in deeper shame and distress. So this is actually how I discovered somatic body-based healing. My name is Marina Yanai Triner, and I am the Compassionate Somatic Coach. I am gentle, sensitive, and I love deep conversations. I'm so excited and so glad you're here so we can feel like we're together in our own little bubble of deep talks.
So when I shared with my therapist about this, she said, you need to sit in the pain of this. You need to sit in the pain that you're feeling about having shared something and not having had a response. And so I said, yay, I'm not coming next week because it was at the end of our session. And we laughed. But I did. I sat in that. And what was revealed to me was so fascinating. It was actually more about longing than it was about pain. And to my surprise, under pain, there was longing. And longing didn't actually feel painful. And I suddenly realized that I've never allowed myself to actually want anything. I've never allowed myself to just want things. From a very embodied adult stance, whenever I wanted things, it would be from helplessness. It would be from a child state of desire. And I would cover it up many different ways so that I didn't have to feel it, to feel the desire. And it wasn't because feeling the desire is painful, as I found out. Feeling the desire is not painful. What's painful is all the memories from my childhood surrounding desire. So it's very interesting because this week was the last full moon of the year. And I knew that things were going to come up and I was very curious about it. And because I had a bitch slap of a year, as many of you know, because I talk about it all the time, if you've listened to other episodes, in the last few months, I've been so good, like so happy. And even though this thing was distressing to my nervous system, it did not bring me down. I wasn't sleeping well, I was tossing and turning, but I'm really in a place of trust. And I reached it by going through the crap, like really allowing the hard things. So one of the things that I was reflecting on this week and that I was really learning is that so many men in my life so far have had an issue with my needs. Whenever my needs meant that they were not meeting those needs, or they couldn't, or they didn't want to. Usually they couldn't. It brought up a lot of shame in them. And I've had a lot of narcissistic men in my life, starting with my father. Makes sense. He created the blueprint. And as a result, when we sit with shame, we all have shame. I have shame. when somebody gives us feedback, like, hey, I need this, and you didn't do it properly, or you didn't give it to me, or, you didn't show up the way that I wanted, we can drown in the shame. And that's a very common aspect of narcissism, is drowning in the shame, because there is a fear of abandonment and rejection. So instead of taking the feedback and sitting with, okay, maybe this feedback is bringing up pain for me, but I'm not going to deflect it. I'm not going to project it. I'm going to say, oh shit, like I feel pain around this and I should do better. And thank you for telling me. That is a mature stance. I haven't experienced much of that in my life. And so the messaging that I received is not that other people struggle when I have a need that makes them feel a certain way, but that I'm the problem, that my needs are wrong, that my needs are an issue. And needs are such a core part of who we are, So the messaging became that there's something wrong with me, that I'm too much. And I know so many of you identify with feeling like you're too much. And lately, I've had this amazing twist of the story, in my own mind, from I'm too much to somebody just can't meet me and they're not enough. Not at their core, but their behavior is not enough for me. The person they are being is not enough for me. I don't believe that anybody is not enough. Everybody is enough where they're at. And sometimes we cannot be met by somebody else, But that messaging in my childhood really came from having a father who had such a deep abandonment wound from his own childhood. And these things, of course, get passed down, and had a really hard time looking at it. I mean, never really looked at it. And so instead of like the moments when I needed more from him, instead of reflecting and seeing that he was drowning in shame, and shame is very uncomfortable, right? We don't like to sit in that. So he didn't acknowledge the shame. He didn't acknowledge the discomfort. He just wanted to turn it off. So he would project and say, you did this and this. You're the problem. And that continued in so many of my relationships, where men would say, instead of saying, oh shit, like, thank you for the feedback, they would say, you don't really need that. Other people don't need that. Why do you need that? Basically, like, there's something wrong with my desire or my need. And I remember so clearly as a child this feeling. I don't know if there was like a specific message, like if somebody literally said, like, you shouldn't want anything, right? I don't think an adult has ever said that to me. But there was very clear messaging around, if you don't want things, you're a good girl. And I wanted to be good because I wanted the connection of my parents. I wanted them to love me. And I witnessed and noticed that if I shut down my needs and desires and didn't speak them out loud, then everything would be okay. So that's what I did. And to me, there was an unconscious equating of like having a desire is equals pain, equals rejection, right? Equals not being wanted. Because if somebody gives you the messaging as a child that you're a bad child, what that really means is like, I'm rejecting you. And as children, this is not like purely emotional. This is actually a core nervous system survival state. Because if your parent says you're bad, that means I'm disconnecting from you. And when a parent disconnects from you, that means you can't survive as a child, right? So there were many messages like that I received. And I also learned that both my parents couldn't handle to disappoint me for different reasons. My mom, it was like external in the sense of like, she would just feel so bad and talk about it incessantly and like, oh my God, like she couldn't disappoint me and I couldn't disappoint her. There was just no room for disappointment. And it came from this like empathetic place, right? And with my dad, it came from a narcissistic place of like, he cannot be wrong. But it really was the same thing, right? It's like when we look at the empath and the narcissist in their shadow sides, it's really the same thing. There's manipulation because you cannot get disappointed by me. I have to be perfect. You have to see me as perfect. So let's talk about desire, because in this week I realized desire is not painful. Desire is fun. Longing is fun. It feels good, but it's also very vulnerable and terrifying. When we desire something, it means that we also sit with the idea that we might not get it, or that when we put our desires out there, we're also sitting with the idea that we might get rejected, that we might feel pain. But desire in itself is not painful. And I think that the reason that I've gotten to the point where desire is no longer painful for me, it's been a big shift. I've never allowed myself to feel desire because it always came with disappointment. And I didn't have the tools to be with disappointment because I didn't have safety inside. I needed to achieve feeling safe through someone else wanting me or approving of me or being around me or giving me what I want. And because I lost all of that, there had to be a loss of all of that so that I could learn that, holy shit, like I can lose everything and I'm still okay because I have myself. And I have my own back, and I'm still here. You know, I didn't die. My system, my nervous system, felt like if I lose these things, if I lose a husband, if I lose money, if I lose my relationship with my parents, I'm going to die. Of course, that's not true, but that's what our system perceives. And it didn't happen. And I think that it was such a core wound that I had to go through that to feel like, oh, I'm okay, like it didn't happen, right? So now desiring feels safe and receiving feels more safe because we can't receive something if we're not letting ourselves desire it. When you desire something, I just like imagine you opening your arms and surrendering and just saying, I want this. And just putting yourself out there like that. I want this. And then I have space in my body to receive it. And if you've always struggled to get what you want, you've always struggled to get the relationship that you want, you've always struggled to get friendships or money or whatever goals you had, and you're listening to this, I feel pretty strongly that you don't know how to receive because you don't let yourself desire. I don't think that this is talked about enough, that in order to receive, you actually have to desire. Like you have to feel the longing. And what is longing? There's a part of longing that's like emptiness, right? That's like, I don't have. And yeah, there is pain there. And I think that in order to get to the point where we can feel longing in a safe way and like really allow ourselves to feel that, we have to process all of the times that we weren't allowed to desire as children, that we were disappointed, that our desires were mocked. One of the things that happened to me is men would equate my needs and desires to control. So I had the story in my mind that desiring means controlling. And I don't want to be a controlling person. I want to be surrendered. That feels much better to me. But that's not a correct equation by any means. Desiring, feeling desire, stating your desires, like I want this and this, I want this person, I want this thing, I want this money, whatever. that doesn't mean you're controlling. It's actually the opposite. When we suppress our desires, we continually suppress our desires, then we start to become controlling because we become resentful and we become obsessive. And one of my coping mechanisms that was very strong is fantasizing, constantly fantasizing, instead of sitting in the longing and the desire because it didn't feel safe at all. So don't equate a need or a desire with control. Because when you let yourself surrender to your own needs and desires, you're in a surrendered state. And again, we have to do the shadow work part of it. We have to do the healing part to be able to safely do this. We have to process these memories in our body of all the moments when it wasn't okay to want, when we were punished or mocked or ridiculed for wanting, when we shrunk our desires. And a story that I've shared here before, but I'll share it because it's a really good example, is I remember one of my first memories with money is when I was like, I think I was like 5, maybe even younger, and I saw a doll that I wanted, and I told my mom that I want this doll, and she said, we don't have money to buy it. And I could feel, as a little empathetic child, I could feel her pain and I could feel her shame. I could feel her shame. So I said, it's okay, Mommy, you can buy it for me when you have money. And that kind of like comforting your parent is actually incredibly painful and not healthy, because a child should want, and it should be okay. And a parent should deal with their shame rather than putting it on the child, shame and guilt. And when you have a parent who is emotionally immature, they don't have the tools to deal with their own shame and guilt, and they need the child to soothe that for them, which is not the child's job. So that was just the beginning of all this messaging I constantly had, which was like, if you want something that we can't give you, that triggers shame and guilt in us, and you have to soothe it. So rather than doing all this like emotional labor, I just never expressed anything else that I wanted. I was just shut down externally to my desires, and eventually that led to a shutdown in my own body. Like I wasn't in touch with my own needs and desires. It took a lot of work to figure out what the heck do I want and need, you know? And so if this is something that you want to work on, we would do a lot of work around those core memories in your body, not just in your mind, of those moments when your desires were not welcomed and when you had to be perfect and you had to perform. Like you just couldn't be your core self because your core self wants, your core self desires. This is just being human, right? And when you allow yourself slowly and gently through processing these core memories, when you get to the point where you allow yourself to want and desire, you feel more connected to yourself. You feel more like yourself. You feel more free. You feel more surrendered. And those things come to you because it's very dysregulating when we suppress ourselves. When we shrink ourselves, not only is it dysregulating to our nervous system, to our sleep, digestion, immune system, like suppression of your emotions and desires and needs is suppression of you as a human. I had digestive issues my entire life when I was doing this, and it literally all shifted in the last 6 months when I stopped suppressing to that degree. So I would love to work with you on this. I have a beautiful offering right now, and I have 3 spots available for it, which is a 3-month coaching program, one-on-one. And in it, we will be doing a lot of voice notes. So we will have contact pretty much daily. And we will also do 3 sessions. But I love the voice note idea of like daily exchanges because there's so much that you can heal and process like that, and touch into and look at your triggers and like really dig into things in a very powerful way. So much can shift for you in 3 months where you then turn on, turn the lights on, turn yourself on to life, to feel alive, to feel connected, to feel the core of who you are, to feel that beautiful aliveness. So the information for that is in the show notes. And thank you for joining me. Please share this episode with a friend who needs to hear it. I love you, and I'll see you soon.
Thank you so much for joining me and listening to this episode. If you liked it, please make sure to leave me a review so that more beautiful humans can get to this podcast, and subscribe to the show. And please do share it with a friend who would benefit. And I always love to hear from all of you on Instagram, so visit me there at marina.y.t. I share really awesome content and would love to hear your comments about the episodes. Until next time, I love you so much and I appreciate you. Have the most beautiful day.